The W2O South by Southwest video series explores latest trends, best practices, and innovations with industry experts live from South by Southwest.
So I am really proud to talk to you about this book. And yes, you are the first people in the world to actually get this book in your hand. So it's a little bit of a coup as well. I'm going to talk to you about my own personal journey. It's one that Aaron alluded to as well. You'll see a lot of nautical themes throughout. I do like to sustain and bastardize metaphors, to the point of no return. But this gives you a sense of my own personal journey. I was so proud. It was a bucket list item for me to write a book. I think I wrote a book when you didn't need a Twitter account to get a fake book deal, etc. And now I've written 5. And Aaron and I actually ended up collaborating with my company, Crayon, and then also through Flip the Funnel. I described Flip the Funnel as the best book that I would ever write, and which was a problem because then I published my 4th and I still said Flip the Funnel was the best book I'd ever write. Why? Because of customers, right? Retention is the new acquisition. We are unbelievable as marketers and business professionals, how obsessed we are on acquisition. And yet, the only reason why we're in business is because of our customer, right? Good head nodding as well. And so, I thought this would be the best book I would ever write until Built to Suck. And I just love hearing it roll off your tongue. Inevitable was a tougher one, but Built to Suck came off beautifully. So, I went into my daughter's classroom about 4 years ago, and I saw this chart. And I was just fascinated by it. 5,000 years of history. Looking at civilizations, looking at empires, looking at the rise and fall. The Ottomans, the Mings, the Byzantines, the Romans, Nazi Germany. You just see all of these civilizations. And I was so inspired by it. And I actually said, well, let's kind of look at a few of them, right? Little pop quiz for you guys to see if you really are paying attention. Anybody know who that is? The Chief Marketing Officer of Procter & Gamble. Come on, it's an easy one, guys. Work with me, please. Too many breakfast tacos. All right, this one's a bit easier, right? Or not. That's Khan. This one's easy, right? The chairman of the board. No way, that was Frank Sinatra. That's Mao. Yeah, it's getting easier and easier. Who do you think comes next, guys? So let me tell you, if ever you guys keynote and write books, never bring politics into your presentation. You should never, ever do that. No, it's not actually him. It's him, So the question is now, what do these 5 upstanding gentlemen have in common? And the answer is all 5 were delusional megalomaniacs who thought they could rule the world and live forever. So Ronald McDonald represents marketing and branding and brand equity and all of this theory and all of this practice, best practices, the 4 Ps. It's our craft in trade, itself about 100 years old. And I looked at this and I said, wait a second, if the corporation were a civilization, would it too go the same way? So I believe that the business model of big business is broken. Absolutely broken. The very thing that actually helped these companies grow and rise and scale, right, which was size, economies of scale, efficiencies, cost cutting, global networks and resources, the very thing that helped it grow is now an albatross around its neck, starving it, suffocating it, and preventing it from growth. If there's an imperative that you park into your mind over the next few days, is growth. Not fake growth, not bought growth, not private equity or M&A growth, but ultimately real growth, organic growth, customer-driven growth. If a company is not growing, it is dying. It is being starved out of the real kind of pipeline that sustains it. So companies are not built to last. In fact, companies are built to suck. And as I said in the book, the key to success is to suck less. It's really quite simple. Just suck a little less than the other guy, in a sense. But I really think that in all seriousness, that we are actually witnessing what I call the coming of the corporate apocalypse. And with all apocalypses, there have to be 4 horsemen. And I'll tell you what those 4 horsemen are. The first one is size, right? The quote came from Jay Scheid. Let's see how big we get before we go bad. Let's see how big we get before we suck. Unfortunately, yeah, with size comes suckage. It's what happens. Now think about this as well. You know, I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but, you know, I have asked this question to about 3,000 or 4,000 marketers. The question is, in the past 12 months, have you had even one budget cut, budget freeze, reorg, restructure? Or maybe I should say, how many have you had? Because I have not found one marketer that has lived through 12 months of continuity and pure momentum. Just when we move forward, we get our legs cut off at the knees. That's why we're not growing. That's why there's no momentum, because of this constant need to have to pull us back. We take 1 step forward to move 2 steps back. It's what I call death by 1,000 budget cuts. And we've got to figure out a way to fix it. The second one is age. So people came up to me and they said, what about Facebook? What about Google? What about Amazon? Do they suck? My answer was, well, Facebook already sucks. But the answer is legitimately, no, but one day they will. So my litmus test is a millennial company, a company born in 1980 or more recently. They have a stay of execution, but it is inevitable. The third is being a public company. You know, Elon Musk had a bit of a nervous breakdown. You know, he went a little bit crazy, smoked a little bit of a doobie on the Joe Rogan podcast. You know, he also found out that tweeting late at night can cost you a lot of money at the end of the day. But what really happened? He's a true visionary. You may not understand him, but surely you respect him, and surely you recognize that people like him are very few. There are few of them left. They don't like being told what to do by grubby external shareholders and stakeholders. So unfortunately, what's happening today is companies are suffering not from an STD, but a CTD, a corporate transmitted disease called short-termitis. And short-termitis, it's chronic. I know there's a lot of pharma and healthcare people here as well. And it's debilitating, because what happens with short-termitis is we just get sucked into this continuous need to produce our fiduciary responsibility, which is short-term earnings, but we can't move forward. So I actually say, forget about long-term planning. You don't have the time. You don't have the luxury for long-term planning. What you need is long-term thinking and short-term planning and short-term acting. And then the fourth one is culture. And, you know, if I had to, again, I'm not putting you guys on the spot. I'm here to help. But think about how many of your companies, right? How would you score in terms of size, in terms of age, in terms of being a public company, in terms of culture? What do I mean by culture? Think about the words we use. Target marketing. We call our customers targets. We brand them like cattle. Remember I spoke to you about acquisition? So my point is this. A first-time buyer is a stranger, and a competitive conquest or a switcher is a prostitute. They are promiscuous customers, and you are a pimp. So I say just own it. Wear a purple velvet, suit with that beautiful feathered hat, and just own it. But seriously, this is what happens, right? We're courting strangers and prostitutes as opposed to people that love us, people that would tattoo our brands on their body, our lifeblood, our advocates, our super consumers, our influencers, our zealots. The Z of zero is zealots as well. So when you put that all together, what you see is that companies are moving in the wrong direction. They're too big, they're too siloed, they're too bureaucratic, they're too political, they're too conservative, they're too risk averse. They are ultimately slowing down when the world is speeding up. I think companies are heading in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, it is a dead end, and it's one that we have to figure out how to reverse. Why is this happening? As I said, companies are slowing down when the world is speeding up. I'm talking about the fifth industrial revolution. I'm talking about the entrepreneurial revolution. This is the life, this is the world we're living in. And it affects everything. It's technology that is disrupting and disintermediating and absolutely disrupting business models, not just businesses, but entire industries and business models. But it's also our ability to attract and retain talent. Millennials and Gen Zers don't want to work for us. The concept of being a lifer. They don't want a gold Rolex. They might want a gold Apple Watch, but not a gold Rolex as well. And so it's absolutely affecting every part of our business. And something needs to change. So in the book, what I actually did was I said, if it's in fact, first of all, we've got the anecdotal data, right? We've got Payless, we've got Sears, we've got Toys R Us, we've got Blockbuster. We can see it happening. But there's empirical data as well. So how many of you have seen that data point? 50% of Fortune 500 companies from 2000 are gone. By the way, it's being used incorrectly. Gone doesn't mean dead. I'm not trying to hype and overhype and the sky is falling down, etc. It just means not in the Fortune 500 anymore. But that's still pretty damning because think of the market capitalization that is being wiped off the face of the earth. But then I did more research, and I have about 8 or 9 different data points, and it's breathtaking. The lifespan of a corporation has dropped from 75 to 15 years in just 50 years. 51% of Fortune 500 companies have had declining revenues on average over the last 3 years. 51%, 1 in every 2. And in fact, the S&P will turn over by 50% over the next 10 years. So we see all this data, and the data suggests both anecdotally and empirically that we are coming to a point, as Yogi Berra once said, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. So what do? Well, the first thing is I came up with a philosophy called embrace your heresy. Embrace your heresy to define your legacy. What does that mean? It means embrace your fears, your deepest, darkest fears. Instead of avoiding them, instead of sweeping them under the rug and then tripping on them and breaking your neck. I'll give you examples. Andy Grove at Intel, he fired himself. The next day he was rehired, and the first thing he did was start to get out of the business that in fact he was in. Why did he do that? And why did it happen that way? Because he was too connected to legacy and incumbency. And he said, look, any schmuck, on their first day on the job would start to diversify the portfolio. There are a bunch of other examples. And some of them are quite, what if you gave away your product for free and still no one wanted it? Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the newspaper industry. What if you slaughtered the cash cow? Netflix, when they shipped their billionth DVD, they shut it down and they moved all into streaming. What if you left money on the table? REI closed their stores on Black Friday. They said, get out, get outside. Why would you come in here and spend all your time on a day off on this beautiful Thanksgiving weekend as well? What if you funded your competitor? Have you guys seen what Domino's is doing right now? Any pizza. They're telling you to snap a photo of any pizza, their competitor's pizza, frozen pizza, store-bought pizza, homemade pizza, and they're giving loyalty points that you can redeem for a Domino's pizza. That's marketing strategy, because they understand business. They're creating trial, but doing it through advocacy ultimately, and they're not afraid to say, we know that you're probably with our competitor. That's okay as well. So the first idea is embrace your heresy to define your legacy. McDonald's heresy just might be obesity. Some of the ideas in the book are, if it doesn't make you uncomfortable, I'm not doing my job. But then what I do is I lay a table with 4 legs, because a table should have 4 legs, and those 4 pillars are as follows. 1, digital disruption. 2, customer obsession. 3, talent resurrection. And 4, corporate citizenship. And I'll just spend a minute or 2 just talking on each one of them. First of all, digital disruption. Think about it. It's quite simple. Digital is disrupting us. So if you can't beat them, join them. So let's use digital ourselves to either disrupt ourselves, but more importantly, to disrupt everybody else. especially those pesky competitors out there. So did you guys hear about these two guys? They couldn't get a cab or a car when they needed one, and so they started this little company called Uber. Or, the surfer dude, which clearly reflects that I'm not a surfer, who wanted, before drones, to capture his surfing experience first person, and so he created the world's fastest and best-selling camera at the time called GoPro. Or, just for you guys, a little startup called RunPee that tells you exactly when in the movie you can run and pee. In other words, the boring parts of the movie. By the way, it's so funny because when I present RunPee, I've seen countless chief marketing officers, and they stand up and they show their reel, and literally you can hear the crickets in the room, the underwhelming nature of their film or their TVC. And then I talk about RunPee and everybody laughs and giggles because it's all true, right? Is there anybody here that has never needed to run and pee? And by the way, of course, on a more serious note, it's not just, growing older. I'm a man, I'm growing older, things are changing, I won't go into details. What about pregnant women? What about parents of young children? And what about people that suffer from overactive bladder syndrome? And so ultimately you see this startup and you think to yourself, wait a second, what do they all have in common? They all have pain, they all have frustration, they all have curiosity. And I thought about it, I said, well, wait a second, marketers are so good at asking these questions. We're so great at writing creative briefs and business briefs and innovation briefs. We're really good at being able to complain about market share and millennials and tastes and preference and consideration and regulation. So if we all ask the same questions, why don't we come out with the same answers? Why don't we start a startup? Why don't we create technology? Why don't we think of digital as a disruptor and not a way to teach an old dog new tricks? Programmatic, native, etc. Okay, price of entry, boring, uninspiring, but it's not going to change the game. So customer obsession, I think it's self-explanatory, but I'll just touch on a few thoughts. Number one, no more customer service, no more customer experience. Those words are old. Enough people have written books on that. It's now obsession. And it is borderline unhealthy. There's a line, and it's called a restraining order. Don't cross that line. But that's how close we need to get to our customers. Jeff Bezos, in his first letter to his shareholders, he spoke about customer obsession. And I say other things in the book, like we need to put the custom in customer. There is no A or I in customer, but perhaps there should be. I think the real role of AI is customer obsession. The third one is talent resurrection. And the 2 points are very simple. Number one, ban the employee. That word is a swear word. How can we call our talent employees that check in and check out? Whether they're blue collar or white collar, I don't care what collar or maybe no collar. But we shouldn't call our internal customer an employee. Why am I saying that? Because they're entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs. How do we put the fun in funding, in corporate funding? How do we embrace the gig economy? How do we change the way? Listen, poor corporations, I feel bad for them. They think they're startup-y because they have standing desks and beanbags and offer some free food. That is not the cultural change and the behavior change that they need. Ultimately, your employee, in air quotes, your disgruntled employee, they're going to leave your company, I guarantee you. They might just start the competitor that puts you out of business. So instead, embrace them. Give them the security of their 401k, of their benefits, of their healthcare, but also give them the excitement of tapping into that entrepreneurial revolution. And then the fourth one is corporate citizenship. Corporate citizenship ultimately is about, it's very simple. If you want to do good, you got to be good. And we're not good. We're kind of evil. So I came up with a whole piece of thinking called mirror and glass. So think about it. Corporations are houses of mirrors, halls of mirrors, smoke and mirrors. Brands are mirrors. They're not real. They're just reflections. And sometimes they're not real reflections. They're reflections of an aspiration of what we want people to see and think about us, as opposed to gloss. The world is gloss. It is moving to gloss. Glass door, glass houses. When you go to a restaurant, you see into the kitchen. We need to move as corporations from opacity to transparency. So those are the 4 pillars supported by this idea of embrace your heresy to define your legacy. So what do you do first? What do you do next? Well, I created a survival planning canvas, and it is available for you to download on builttosuck.com. It's free. It's not, and it's in the book as well. And I even completed it for a couple of people. Some of them may be in this room. But it's an amazing way to actually create that journey map, that innovation roadmap, where you ask the tough questions. That's called walk the plank. Are you prepared to put yourself out of business? Think about this. If you can sketch out a competitive or cannibalistic idea that potentially could put you out of business, and it's so good, 2 things. Why wouldn't you do it yourself? Why not have 2 horses in the race instead of 1? You've got a better chance of winning. But more importantly, and this is what we learn from the entrepreneurial world, that for any idea being thought of or prepared or developed or implemented at any time, there are 3 to 5 entrepreneurs that are further down the road with a better product as well. So there is a paranoia and a neurosis about competing today, about being in survival mode. People talk about developing the marketing muscle. I talk about the survival instinct, fight or flight, self-preservation or adaptation. When we feel our lives are threatened, that's when we kind of spring into a different gear, when the adrenaline starts to pump. And that's the kind of cultural change that we need to implement in companies. So I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. Number 1, I get asked a lot of questions. I will ask myself the questions and answer them for you today. So number 1, what's the next big thing? My answer is there is no next big thing, you moron. The next big thing is now. AI-powered, IoT-enabled drones, neat. But let's try and get search and email and our websites right and customer obsession. Let's take care of the fundamentals, and then we can figure out what to do. Number 2, who's doing it right, Joe? My answer, no one's doing it right. And the people you think are doing it right just have great PR departments. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Be a golfer. Play every shot. Keep your head down, focus on your game. You'll hear a couple of roars from the gallery, but don't get distracted. Stay focused. Number 3, how do we sell this through to senior management? 4 ways, not 1 way. For change to happen, you have to be able to sell top down, from the C-suite down, bottom up, from the rock face, your entry-level talent pool, outside in, that's what we were discussing as well. Bring in the thinking, whether it's from your agency, from thought leaders, from authors. That's why you come to South by Southwest, to be inspired by diversity and perspective, and bring that validation inside your company. But the hardest one is what I call inside out. It is the rot of middle management. The reason why companies are not changing and changing quick enough is because of the people stuck in the middle. And it's hard. That's the hardest one to change because they have less choice in terms of their career. They're a little too old to just willy-nilly switch companies. And they're also a little too young or maybe junior to count down the days until they get their little golden parachute. But there are ways to do it as well, through compensation, through incentivization, and by inspiring them and allowing them to realize that failure is a good thing. We should reward failure. We should create award shows called the Losies that are big L's made out of lead or copper, and we should celebrate our talent pool that took the biggest risk, that failed fast, that pivoted, that learned something. That's what we should be doing. And then the 4th is what do we do first? What do we do next? Well, you've already done that. You're here. You showed up to W2O today. You came to South by Southwest. You're putting yourself out there. My belief, and I say this with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, but there is, I mean it genuinely, is you can't learn about change from a book, even mine. You got to experience it. So I did 2 things in the book that I just want to share with you before I wrap up. The first is I became an Uber driver, and I document my story in the book. You want to understand why Uber has grown the way it did? You got to experience it. You got to see how easy it is to become an Uber driver. And yes, I passed the background check. I'm not sure how. Thank God I didn't have to run pee in a cup. But I'll just share one quick story with becoming an Uber driver. I had to drive a certain amount of times to keep my license. I didn't really want to. So I opened up my Uber app, and then I opened up my driver app, and I called Uber, and then I answered it, and I basically picked myself up. I drove myself around the block. I dropped myself off. I gave myself 5 stars, and then I returned the favor with 5 stars. And of course, I lost money on the deal because Uber took a cut. That was my second story, and I document the other 2 in the book as well. The other thing is, I don't know why, but I just love talking about pee. I went to the Independence Beer Hall in Philadelphia. I was there for a wedding. And I went into the toilet. And there was a bathroom attendant. And he was on Venmo. So, you guys on Venmo? Yes. All right. I want you to do this for me. Go to A1 Bathroom on Venmo and give him $1. His name's Lindell Westbrook. He doesn't know me from Adam. But I want to make him a millionaire. Seriously, go and give him $1. And if you're not on Venmo and you don't know what I'm talking about, get on Venmo, because that's going to be your way of saying, let's understand what's happening in payments and financial services, etc. So let's make Lindell Westbrook a millionaire, because he's an innovator. Because you go into a bathroom and you see a bathroom attendant on Venmo. What does he know that you don't, or your bosses don't know? And by the way, strategically, you're not dealing with money and, washing your hands and that part of it as well, right? So there's a practicality associated. And of course, one more point, we're moving to a cashless society anyway. So this guy is innovating when the MasterCards and the Visas of the world are still struggling to figure it out. And maybe when they could have bought Venmo, they didn't. So think about it. Those are the 4 questions, and remember, there are 3 types of companies, like there are 3 types of people. There are those who make things happen. There are those who watch things happening. And then there are those that turn around and say, what happened? Don't be those companies. Remember, the key to success is to suck less. I wish you guys a fantastic conference, and of course, finally, just to thank W2O for the opportunity. Thank you.
Want more South by Southwest content? Follow W2O Group on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and view our South by website page.